Welcome, deeply curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're not just dipping our toes in, we're plunging headfirst into a truly vast ocean of human wisdom.
It really is vast.
Our sources for this journey are nothing short of epic, a collection of texts spanning millennia, different cultures from, ancient mystics right up to modern psychologists and spiritual teachers.
Yeah, an incredible range.
And it's a powerful testament, I think, to the universal human quest. This drive to understand our inner lives, find meaning in this, well, sometimes bewildering experience we call existence.
Absolutely. These big questions. Who are we? Why do we suffer? How do we live a good life? They've puzzled and inspired humanity for, well, forever.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating is how many different and yet sometimes surprisingly similar answers pop up from these incredibly varied traditions.
Precisely. And that's really our mission today. We want to sift through this rich tapestry, this wealth of material, and extract the most crucial insights.
Kind of like finding the key threads.
Exactly. Think of it as, unearthing those precious nuggets of knowledge. The insights that act as a shortcut, maybe, to becoming truly well-informed about these profound topics. We'll be looking for common themes, sure, but also striking contrasts in how different traditions define the self, how they approach adversity, and, ultimately, how they guide us toward a deeper sense of purpose.
So, cutting through the noise to get to the core wisdom.
That's the goal, equipping you with a richer understanding of these fundamental human experiences.
And I promise you, we're going to uncover some unexpected connections, maybe some surprising facts along the way, from, say, the polytheistic rituals of ancient Egypt all the way to modern self-help. This deep dive promises to be as enlightening as it is expansive. We'll even be navigating what you might call a kind of counterintuitive spirituality.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, this journey into understanding how sometimes the path to a good life isn't about eliminating problems, but maybe about choosing better ones, embracing struggle as, a vital part of growth.
It's a powerful theme we see again and again.
So buckle up because we're diving deep into the inner world, self, struggle, and spirit across tradition.
Okay, so let's unpack this first huge question. What is the self? It's fundamental.
Well, where do we even begin?
Well, what's striking is how many spiritual and philosophical traditions, across vast stretches of time and geography, they converge on a remarkably similar idea.
Which is?
There's something we often call a false self, or maybe a limited self. It's not necessarily like evil or bad,
Okay.
but it's an aspect of our identity that often acts as a barrier to deeper understanding, to true being. It's a recurring theme in our sources, suggesting that, well, to genuinely know ourselves, we first need to identify what we are not.
Interesting. So identify the illusion first.
Exactly. Let's start with Eckhart Tolle. In The New Earth, he offers a really clear explanation. He describes the ego as an identification with form.
Form, like physical things.
That's part of it, sure.
Yeah.
Identified with material possessions, our bodies, definitely. But Tolle extends this much further. He includes what he calls thought forms.
Thought forms. You mean like beliefs?
He means that relentless voice in your head that never stops speaking, that inner monologue. He's not just being metaphorical. He's pointing at the incessant, often compulsive thinking that just dominates our inner landscape.
That sounds familiar.
Right. And this incessant and compulsive thinking, he argues, leads to a profound forgetfulness of being, a disconnect from a deeper reality. For Tolle, this is the primary error. It's the illusion of absolute separateness that turns reality into a nightmare.
Wow, strong words.
They are. When we're trapped in this egoic state, we become completely consumed by every thought, every emotion that pops up. And he makes a very provocative statement. Negativity, he says, is not intelligent. It is always of the ego.
Okay, wait. Negativity isn't intelligent.
According to Tolle, no. The ego might be clever, in pursuing its own little aims, its short-term goals. But he says it's fundamentally short-sighted. It can't see the larger, interconnected whole, and ultimately this leads to self-defeating outcomes.
So cleverness serves the ego, but intelligence sees the bigger picture.
Precisely. He contrasts them clearly. Cleverness divides. Intelligence unites. The ego thinks it's playing chess, maybe, but it's really just constantly knocking over its own pieces while declaring victory. Not exactly a grand strategy for long-term well-being.
That distinction is really helpful. That feeling when you're caught in a loop of worry or criticism, it doesn't feel very intelligent, does it? Just relentless.
Exactly. And building on that idea, Marianne Williamson, drawing from A Course in Miracles in her book, A Return to Love, She highlights how this ego specifically plays out in our relationships, our connections with others.
How so?
She argues that the ego employs a really cunning ploy. It makes us seek but not find true connection.
Seek but not find.
By constantly making us overlook the opportunities for healing and growth that are right there in our present relationships. The ego whispers that real life, genuine intimacy, that's always just around the corner, always later.
The grass is greener syndrome, but applied to connection.
Kind of, yeah. Or maybe the real relationship starts tomorrow. It prevents us from engaging fully with what's right in front of us. It hinders our growth by making us discount perfectly good, valuable situations. It's a clever form of self-sabotage, keeping us perpetually searching and often perpetually dissatisfied.
That really resonates. Looking for the perfect thing instead of working with what you have.
Mm-hmm. Then if we look back further to Theologia Germanica, this is an anonymous mystical text from the late Middle Ages, it introduces a concept called the false light.
The false light sounds ominous.
Well, it's not some external devil figure. It's described as our own ego-driven natural understanding, that part of us obsessed with the me, the mind, the self, and the like.
So self-centeredness, basically.
Yes, but specifically the kind driven by a constant seeking of external validation, intellectual pride, self-importance. The kind of understanding that, as the text says, must depart and perish for the true light or genuine spiritual awakening to emerge.
So it has to go away entirely.
That's the idea in this text. This natural light, tied to the ego, it finds great pleasure, delight, and glorying in its discernment and knowledge. It's always longing to know more and more. But, and this is crucial, it never cometh to rest and satisfaction.
Always seeking, never finding peace, like Williamson's point about relationships.
Exactly, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. Now, jumping to ancient philosophy, Plotinus, in the Enneads, gives us this beautiful metaphor for purifying the self.
Okay.
He describes the soul after its infection by the rust of time, like the accumulated conditioning and experiences, grasping itself and beholding inner statues. He uses this analogy of ensouled gold. Imagine gold mixed with earth.
Right.
Once it knocks off that earthy element, the impurities, and sees itself for what it truly is, pure gold, it's astonished at its own nature. Yeah. It realizes it has no need, after all, of beauty imported from without. Its own intrinsic value and beauty are supreme. So the journey isn't about adding something to ourselves. It's about polishing away the rust, the conditioning, to reveal this inherent, perfect essence that was there all along.
That image of the rust of time is so vivid, it really sticks with you. What strikes me here looking at Tolle, Williamson, this medieval text, Plotinus, they're all from such different worlds, different eras.
Completely different contexts.
Yet there's this profound agreement. Our main barrier to inner peace isn't really out there. It's this self-created story, this ego-driven narrative, Tolle's thought forms, Plotinus's rust of time. It's like a veil we wear.
A self-imposed veil.
It suggests our biggest challenge isn't the world itself, but maybe the operating system of our own minds, always seeking validation outside or fixating on what we think we lack. It feels like a truly universal human struggle. Okay, so if this ego or false self is, as these sources suggest, a construct, a set of stories, identifications, maybe even brain patterns, what then defines our true identity? That's the next big question, isn't it?
It really is.
And how do we actually go about shaping it? Or maybe discovering it? Is identity something fixed we just need to find? Or is it more like a constellation we're constantly drawing in the sky? Let's explore this idea, the fluidity and formation of identity itself.
That's the million-dollar question, absolutely. If the ego is a construction, what's left when we peel back those layers? Is it static?
Yeah.
Or is it, as you put it, something we're always actively creating? Michael Pollan, in How to Change Your Mind, brings a fascinating scientific perspective here. He talks about the default mode network, or DMN, in the brain.
The DMN, I've heard of that. It's what's active when our minds wander, right?
Exactly. It's our brain's inner narrator, the system humming along when we're not focused on an external task. It handles self-reflection, planning, daydreaming, and crucially, those ingrained stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Pollan suggests this DMN is the physiological location, if you like, of our autobiographical or experiential self.
The storyteller in our head.
Precisely. It's the source of narratives like, this is who I am, or I don't deserve to be loved, or maybe I'm just not the kind of person who can stick with things.
Wow, those can be powerful stories.
Incredibly powerful. And Pollan argues that Getting overly attached to these narratives, taking them as fixed truths about ourselves rather than as stories subject to revision, contributes mightily to addiction, depression, and anxiety.
So holding onto the story too tightly is the problem.
That's his point. And then he introduces the really interesting idea that psychedelic therapy can actually temporarily disintegrate the parts of the default mode network where they operate.
Disintegrate them.
Temporarily disrupt their usual patterns. This can weaken the grip of these often limiting or harmful narratives, allowing for new perspectives on the self to emerge. It's like hitting a reset button on the storyteller.
So if these narratives are so deeply wired into our brain's architecture, how do we change them without something as drastic as psychedelics? Is it just willpower? Or is there a more subtle way, maybe like some spiritual traditions suggest? Those stories feel incredibly solid sometimes.
That's a great question, and I think the other sources offer some really valuable complementary answers. Joseph Campbell, for instance, in The Power of Myth, he offers a compelling, maybe even surprising, view of identity. He suggests it's forged not in isolation, but in relationship. Specifically, he talks about marriage.
Marriage as identity formation. How?
He describes marriage not as just a simple love affair, but as an ordeal involving the sacrifice of ego to a relationship in which two have become one.
Sacrifice of ego.
Yes. In this kind of profound union, he says, your identity is in a relationship. It's not just me anymore, it's us. He connects this beautifully to the Chinese image of the Tao, that interplay of yang and yin, male and female. It represents a unity formed through dynamic interaction, not static separation.
So identity isn't fixed, it's co-created, an ongoing process within the relationship.
Exactly. A constant act of revision, not just of your individual story, but of the shared narrative. It's dynamic.
That's a very different perspective from the purely individual self.
Very different. And then we have James Baldwin in The Fire Next Time, offering this incredibly powerful, searing perspective on identity forged through adversity, through struggle.
Yeah.
He asserts quite bluntly that people who cannot suffer can never grow up, can never discover who they are. He speaks with intense personal authority, reflecting on the experience of Black Americans, about a man forced each day to snatch his manhood, his identity, out of the fire of human cruelty that rages to destroy it.
That's incredibly intense language.
It is. And Baldwin argues that if such a person survives this fire, they gain an unshakable authority. Why? Because they learn to look beneath appearances, to take nothing for granted, to hear the meaning behind the words.
So the suffering itself becomes a tool for clarity.
Yes. Not suffering for its own sake, but suffering that strips away illusion, forces a confrontation with reality, and demands a profound self-discovery. This viewpoint highlights how, for some, the crucible of intense hardship isn't just a challenge to overcome, it's the very forge where an unshakable identity is created. An identity resistant to external definitions because it's been tested in fire.
It makes the idea of finding yourself seem less passive, more like an active struggle.
Absolutely. Then we turn to Michael A. Singer's The Untethered Soul, which offers a more, let's say, purely spiritual perspective on our core identity.
Okay, how does he frame it?
He posits that the center from which you watch disturbance cannot get disturbed. There's an awareness in you, a witnessing consciousness that observes your thoughts, your emotions, your life unfolding. Yes. And that awareness, he says, transcends what it is aware of. It's as separate as light is from what it shines upon. Singer suggests that true freedom, true liberation, comes from relaxing behind the mind and heart's last throes of turmoil.
Relaxing behind the turmoil.
Yes, identifying not with the thoughts and emotions, but with the awareness watching them. This points to an identity that isn't the content of our experience, not the narratives, not the feelings, but the spacious, unchanging awareness in which all that content arises and passes away. It's an identity that's always present, always whole, regardless of the surface weather.
So we have Pollan talking about changeable narratives in the brain, Campbell and Baldwin about identity forged through relationship and struggle becoming more solid, and Singer pointing to a transcendent awareness beyond all that.
Exactly. What's truly illuminating is the tension here. On one hand, Pollan discusses getting overly attached to fixed narratives, suggesting they are mutable stories. On the other, Campbell and Baldwin speak to a profound, almost unshakable identity emerging from the crucible. And Singer points beyond both to this witnessing consciousness.
It's not a simple picture.
Not at all. What's clear is that our identity is far from a simple static concept. It's an evolving, sometimes painful, always dynamic process. Whether that involves revising our personal stories, merging with another in relationship, facing adversity head-on, or tapping into that deeper witnessing awareness. The journey of self-discovery seems to involve both creation and uncovering, shaping and letting go.
Okay, moving on from the complexity of the self. Let's confront something our modern society often really tries to avoid. Pain, problems, struggle.
Yeah, we're pretty allergic to discomfort.
Right. We're conditioned to believe happiness means the absence of struggle. Smooth sailing all the way. But what if suffering, paradoxically, isn't something to just be sidestepped or fixed immediately? What if it's actually a pathway?
A pathway to what?
To deeper wisdom, maybe. To growth. Can adversity actually be a catalyst for profound personal transformation? A crucial component in building a meaningful life, rather than just an unfortunate detour we try to route around?
It's a fundamental question. And many profound thinkers across history have arrived at a resounding yes. This is where that idea of a counterintuitive spirituality really comes into focus. The good life isn't about eliminating problems. Maybe it's about choosing better problems and facing them well.
Choosing better problems. I like that.
Consider Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. His insights, drawn from his horrific experiences in Nazi concentration camps, are just incredibly powerful.
Unimaginable circumstances.
Truly. And Frankl observed that even there, even in that hell, the last freedom of a human being, the one thing that could not be taken away, was the freedom to determine his attitude in every circumstance, the freedom to choose his own way. Even there, he recounts these incredible examples of prisoners giving away their last scraps of bread, comforting others, demonstrating that while everything else, freedom, dignity, life itself, could be stripped away, this inner freedom of choice, of attitude, remained.
That's astounding.
It is. And he also echoed a sentiment similar to Baldwin's, stating flatly that people who cannot suffer can never grow up, can never discover who they are. For Frankl, suffering wasn't just something to be endured stoically. It was a necessary component for discovering our deepest humanity, our agency, a crucible where the true self is forged.
So even in absolute desolation, the one thing they couldn't take was that inner choice, the choice of attitude. What does that tell us about our everyday struggles, the comparatively minor things we face?
It suggests that our reaction, our internal stance, is perhaps far more powerful than the external event itself. It completely reframes what we think of as power.
It really does. Inner power over outer circumstance.
Absolutely. And Pema Chodron, coming from a Buddhist perspective in When Things Fall Apart, offers a way to embrace a difficulty that aligns perfectly with this. She suggests a meditation practice.
What kind of practice?
It involves acknowledging whatever arises, thoughts, emotions, sensations, without judgment, just noticing them, letting them dissolve, and returning again and again to the openness of this very moment.
So not fighting the thoughts or feelings.
Exactly. Not ignoring pain, but meeting it directly, with openness. She encourages us to use our own personal stuckness, those places where we feel blocked or unhappy, as a stepping stone to understanding what people are up against all over the world.
Turning personal struggle into empathy.
Precisely. Her radical advice is to use what seems like poison as medicine, and to see personal suffering as the path to compassion for all beings. Rather than isolating our pain, she invites us to see it as part of the shared human experience, a bridge that connects us to other struggles, transforming private angst into a kind of universal understanding.
That's a powerful reframe. From why me to this is human.
And we have these profound insights from Christian mystics, like St. John of the Cross in his Dark Night of the Soul.
The Dark Night. That sounds intense.
It is. He describes a rigorous spiritual process, often involving feelings of abandonment or spiritual dryness. But he sees it as God enlightening the soul, giving it knowledge not only of its own lowliness and wretchedness, its imperfections, but also paradoxically of the greatness and excellence of God. This dark night of the desire, as he calls it, isn't a punishment, it's a purification. It cleanses and frees the understanding.
How does suffering cleanse the understanding?
He says that the straightness and aridity of sense, that lack of spiritual comfort, the feeling of being lost, actually enlightens and quickens the understanding. It sharpens our inner sight by removing distractions. And the calming of the four passions of the soul, joy, grief, hope, and fear, through continual mortification, through letting go of attachments, ultimately leads to spiritual liberty. It's a painful stripping away, but it reveals a deeper reality.
So emptying out to become free.
In a sense, yes. And St. Teresa of Avila, in her Interior Castle, speaks of a similar experience. She notes that as one learns more of God's greatness, the desire for spiritual union increases.
Mhm.
This can lead to great distress when feeling unable to fully experience God.
A kind of spiritual frustration.
Exactly. And she highlights that the greatest sufferings in the spiritual night are those anguished thoughts that it has lost God, that feeling of abandonment. Yet, and this is key, she advises that if one understood these afflictions are actually for the best and for his good pleasure, one would rejoice.
Rejoice in suffering. That's hard to grasp.
It is. It's not about seeking suffering, but understanding its potential purpose when it arises within a spiritual framework. It's about trust. She also stresses the importance of humility, realizing our poverty and wretchedness, recognizing that we possess nothing that we have not been given. This recognition of dependence, this letting go of the ego's need for control and self-sufficiency, can actually be a profound catalyst for spiritual surrender and even joy.
Humility as a path to joy.
Yeah.
Another counterintuitive idea.
Very much so. And finally, let's bring in an ancient Roman perspective. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, in On the Shortness of Life, gives this powerful argument against procrastination, urging us to live with purpose now.
How does that relate to struggle?
He cautions us against living as if destined to live forever. He asks how late it is to begin really to live just when life must end. How stupid to forget our mortality and put off sensible plans to our 50th and 60th years. For Seneca, recognizing the brevity and preciousness of life is a form of embracing adversity, the adversity of our finite existence.
Facing our own mortality.
Exactly. And that recognition should spur us to live meaningfully in the present, to engage with life's challenges and opportunities now, rather than postponing true living, putting off the difficult but rewarding work until it's too late. It's about choosing to grapple with the problems of living fully today.
That's a real call to action.
It is. And what's truly powerful, seeing Frankl, Coldren, the mystics, Seneca, is how they collectively challenge this modern myth that happiness means the absence of problems.
Right. They seem to flip it entirely.
They do. They frame problems, suffering, even the awareness of our own mortality as absolutely essential components of growth, self-discovery, and ultimately a more profound, more authentic form of well-being. It's not about avoiding the fire, but walking through it and allowing it to refine you. It's a recurring theme of counterintuitive wisdom. The very thing we try to escape often holds the key. Okay, so following on from that idea, if struggle is a catalyst, what about the other side of the coin, the subtle art of letting go? This brings us to the power of acceptance, non-interference, finding peace not by constantly fighting what is, but by allowing it to be.
That sounds easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. It's a delicate balance, but a crucial one, especially when facing those problems we've chosen, or maybe those that have just been thrust upon us. Tara Brach, in her book Radical Acceptance, gives a really clear definition.
What is radical acceptance according to her?
She defines it as clearly recognizing what is happening inside us and regarding what we see with an open, kind, and loving heart.
Open, kind, and loving, even towards difficult feelings.
Especially towards difficult feelings.
Yeah.
She argues that if our heart shuts out any part of who we are and what we feel, we are fueling the fears and feelings of separation that sustain the trance of unworthiness. Her core point is that our natural tendency to resist pain, physical or emotional, actually amplifies it.
How does resistance amplify pain?
Through our judgments. It's often not the initial pain itself that's the primary issue, but our resistance to it, our judgment about it, the story we immediately tell ourselves about how it shouldn't be happening. Think about stubbing your toe.
Okay, ouch.
Right, the physical pain is one thing, but then there's the instant, oh, why does this always happen to me? I'm so clumsy. That mental anguish layered on top. That's the implication she's talking about. The judgment makes it worse.
Adding insult to injury, literally.
Exactly. And Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now says something very similar. He equates complaining with non-acceptance of what is. He states it invariably carries an unconscious negative charge and essentially makes you a victim of the situation.
Complaining makes you a victim. Interesting.
Yeah. And he offers this very practical, almost stark set of 3 options when you're faced with a present moment situation that feels intolerable.
Okay, what are the options?
He says you can remove yourself from the situation, change it, or accept it totally. That's it. All else, he says, is madness.
Remove yourself, change it, or accept it totally. All else is madness. Wow.
It's incredibly direct. This isn't about passive resignation, like just giving up. It's about conscious engagement with reality. If you genuinely can't change it and you can't leave it, then total acceptance is the only path to inner peace. Any other choice, any internal resistance, complaining, wishing it were different, that's just the ego wanting to control what it can't control. It's a madness because it doesn't work and only causes more suffering.
That's a powerful challenge, those three options, but that accept it totally part, it often feels incredibly difficult in practice, especially with something really painful or seemingly unjust. How do you even find that kind of radical acceptance?
It definitely takes practice, and often it requires a fundamentally different way of relating to the world, a different posture. Benjamin Hoff's book, The Tao of Pooh, offers this delightful, really accessible illustration of an ancient Taoist principle called Wu Wei.
Ooh, way. I've heard that term. Doesn't it mean something like non-action?
Literally, yes, or sometimes translated as effortless action. Hoff explains it like this. Tao does not do, but nothing is not done.
Okay. That sounds a bit paradoxical.
It does. But the essence is that the Tao, the natural way of things, doesn't force or interfere with things, but lets them work in their own way to produce results naturally. Then whatever needs to be done is done.
So getting out of the way, letting things unfold.
Exactly. Hoff uses Winnie the Pooh as the perfect example of being effortless. Things just sort of happen for Pooh when he aligns with the natural flow, rather than striving and struggling against it. It's about wise passivity, knowing when to step back and let things happen, rather than constantly trying to impose your will and control everything. It's a profound form of acceptance, really, trusting the larger flow.
Trusting the flow. That sounds appealing, but also maybe a bit passive in some situations.
And that's a crucial point. William James, in The Varieties of Religious Experience, offers a really important nuanced counterpoint here. While he acknowledges that the solution to our deep sense of something wrong about us often involves making proper connection with the higher powers, maybe through surrender or acceptance.
Right.
He also provides a significant caution. He notes that what he calls saintly conduct, things like sympathy, charity, and non-resistance, while admirable, may be and often have been manifested in excess.
Excess non-resistance.
Yes. Especially, he says, in a world inhabited by what he colorfully calls human crocodiles, people who will exploit that non-resistance.
Yeah.
In such a world, he argues, excessive non-resistance can allow the powers of darkness to have systematically taken advantage of them. He even points out that the entire history of constitutional government is basically a commentary on the excellence of resisting evil, and that sometimes, when one cheek is smitten, the appropriate response is smiting back and not turning the other cheek also.
Wow, that's a really critical distinction, isn't it? It pushes back against unqualified acceptance.
It absolutely does. On one hand, we have these powerful arguments for embracing what is, for releasing resistance and judgment, for finding an effortless flow like Wu Wei. And yet, James reminds us that there's a practical reality, maybe even an ethical imperative, in navigating the world. An unqualified, excessive non-resistance can actually be harmful, allowing injustice or abuse to continue unchecked.
So it raises this crucial question. How do we cultivate that deep inner acceptance, that peace with what is inside ourselves, without becoming passively vulnerable to genuine harm or injustice in the external world?
That's the razor's edge, isn't it?
It seems like the discernment between what must be accepted internally for peace and what must be changed or even fought against externally for justice or safety, that discernment is absolutely critical. It's not about ignoring problems, but wisely choosing which ones require acceptance and which ones demand courageous action.
Okay, so we've grappled with the self and the roles of struggle and acceptance. Now, with that clearer understanding, let's explore the incredibly diverse paths humanity has carved out to find meaning, purpose, and spiritual fulfillment. Many traditions offer, structured practices, devotional journeys, providing clear frameworks, almost like roadmaps, for developing ourselves and connecting to a higher truth.
Roadmaps for the inner world. I like that.
Exactly. Take the Bhagavad Gita, a foundational Hindu scripture. It strongly emphasizes consciousness as the science, the core knowledge.
Consciousness.
It's a state of deep, realized awareness of the divine, personified as Cain. And the Gita makes it very clear. You can't achieve this state simply by mundane scholarship. Just reading books about it isn't enough.
So intellectual understanding isn't the key.
Not sufficient on its own, according to the Gita. It requires realized knowledge, which is gained by the grace of Cain, and, crucially, through pure devotional service. Bhakti Yoga. This isn't just intellectual study. It's a direct, heartfelt engagement with the divine.
Heartfelt engagement.
Yes. The text explicitly warns that mere academic knowledge can be easily diluted and confused by apparent contradictions. It highlights the need for direct experience, sincere devotion, over just intellectual grasping. In this tradition, real self-control comes from surrender to kut, viewing worldly scholarship as, pebbles or stones, compared to the jewel of transcendental, divinely bestowed knowledge.
So it's a shift from understanding about the divine to an experiential immersion in the divine. That's a huge difference. What does that pure devotional service actually look like in practice for someone living it day to day?
It manifests in many ways: chanting sacred names or mantras, offering prayers, performing selfless service, karma yoga, meditating on divine forms, always striving to keep the divine in mind throughout one's activities. It's about infusing daily life with devotion.
Okay. Now, shifting to a more modern context, Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way.
Which has helped so many creative people.
Exactly. She presents a framework for creative and spiritual recovery, which she frames very much as structured practices. She advocates for morning pages as a permanent spiritual practice. Morning pages. That's the 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing.
That's right. Every morning, just dump everything onto the page. Clear out the mental clutter, the egoic chatter, the anxieties. She also promotes artists' dates, dedicated time alone, once a week, to do something purely fun and nurturing for your inner artist self, like visiting a gallery, going to a weird shop, taking a walk somewhere new.
Acts of self-nurturing.
Yes, crucial for creative recovery. And beyond individual practice, she envisions creative clusters, these peer-run support circles that serve as believing mirrors for each other, helping individuals overcome creative blocks and self-doubt. Her underlying message is often summarized as trust God, trust yourself. It suggests this blend of faith, maybe in a higher power or the creative process itself, and self-empowerment, often unlocked through consistent, structured effort, like the morning pages and artist dates.
So structure providing a container for creativity and spirit to emerge.
Precisely. Then we look at the ancient Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the foundational text of classical yoga philosophy. It outlines Kriya Yoga practice, the yoga of action.
Kriya Yoga. What does that involve?
Patanjali defines it as comprising 3 key elements: austerity, tapas discipline, effort; study of the psyche, svadhyaya self-study, including study of scriptures; and profound religious meditation on or surrender to the Supreme Lord, ejvara pratana.
Austerity, self-study, and surrender meditation.
Yes. And this combined practice, the sutras emphasize, is absolutely essential for the liberation of a living being, moksha. Whether it's cultivated slowly through long practice or arises seemingly effortlessly due to past efforts, it's key. It's a very disciplined approach to purifying the mind and body. The sutras also delve into the root causes of suffering, klashas, discussing how things like violence and related actions stem from afflictions like greed, anger, and delusion, which cause endless distress and spiritual ignorance.
And what's the remedy?
Patanjali advises practitioners to actively consider the opposite features, katibhaka bhavanam. So, if you feel anger arising, consciously cultivate compassion. If greed arises, contemplate generosity. It's a structured, disciplined approach to inner transformation, where every thought and action is geared towards dismantling the causes of suffering and achieving liberation.
Actively cultivating the positive opposite. That's very practical.
It is. Now let's consider The Way of a Pilgrim, this anonymous 19th century Russian Orthodox text. It tells the story of a pilgrim who learns the transformative power of the unceasing Jesus prayer.
The Jesus prayer. What is that exactly?
It's a simple, short prayer, often recited internally, constantly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, or variations thereof. The book describes how individuals practicing this prayer simply and without human guidance, just repeating it constantly with faith, can achieve a state where their mouths and tongues could not refrain from reciting the prayer, leading to profound delight and illumination.
So the repetition itself becomes transformative.
Deeply transformative. The text depicts this constant, heartfelt devotion as turning even weak and negligent people into heroic ascetics and champions of virtue. It shows the profound impact that simple, repetitive, heartfelt devotion can have on one's inner state and character, going way beyond just intellectual belief.
The power of focused repetition.
And finally, just to provide some deep historical context for structured practice, let's step way back to ancient Egypt, around 3000 BCE. This was a complex polytheistic civilization.
Right, many gods.
Many gods. And they developed this intricate system of religious beliefs and practices. They attributed natural events, the weather, the vital flooding of the Nile, sickness, health, to the whims of a multitude of divine beings.
So pleasing the gods was crucial.
Absolutely central to life. Their structured practices involved building magnificent temples, offering elaborate sacrifices, food, drink, goods, and performing complex magical rituals to gain their favor. These weren't just occasional things. They were deeply woven into the fabric of society. And central to all this was the figure of the pharaoh, who was believed to be more than just a king. He was seen as the god's human representative on earth, sometimes even divine himself. He played a key role in religious practice, acting as the chief priest, mediating between the human and divine realms. This gives us a really compelling historical example of highly structured, ritualistic communal devotion within a polytheistic framework, where the sacred wasn't separate from daily life, but absolutely integral to it.
It really is striking when you lay it out like that, the contrast between, say, the vast public state-sponsored rituals of ancient Egypt with pharaohs as divine intermediaries, and then the deeply personal, internal, almost silent practices like the unceasing Jesus prayer or Julia Cameron's private mourning pages.
Worlds apart in form.
Completely. Yet, what truly seems to unite them all across millennia and cultures is this common thread: the seeking of connection. Connection with the divine, with a higher truth, with deeper meaning, achieved through dedicated, often disciplined practice. Whether it's chanting, writing, meditating, communal ritual, or sacrifice, humanity consistently devises these methods, these structures, to bridge the gap between the mundane and the sacred, to actively engage with the fundamental problems of meaning and purpose. Okay, so those are some powerful examples of structured paths. Now let's shift our focus a bit. Let's look at paths that seem to emphasize inner wisdom more directly. Personal revelation, a kind of introspective understanding of truth.
Right, journeys where intuition and direct personal experience often take precedence over external dogma or prescribed rituals, where the answers to life's deeper problems are sought and found primarily within.
Exactly. Hermann Hesse's novel Siddhartha beautifully narrates such a journey, doesn't it?
It really does. Siddhartha, the protagonist, he tries various established religious and philosophical paths, asceticism, studying with teachers, but ultimately finds profound learning elsewhere.
Not from a guru.
Not in the end. He finds it from the simple act of observing the river, just sitting and watching it. He describes seeing the river with 1,000 eyes and hearing this internal voice urging him, love this water, stay near it, learn from it.
Learning directly from nature.
Yes, this deep, intuitive engagement. It leads him to believe that he who would understand this water and its secrets would also understand many other things, many secrets, all secrets. The river becomes his ultimate teacher. His quest culminates not in a doctrine but in a meditative state, reciting the sacred syllable Om. He experiences this as a submergence and complete entering into Om, into the nameless, the perfected.
A direct, non-conceptual realization.
Exactly, an understanding that transcends intellectual formulas, found through quiet observation and inner listening.
Okay, what else points to this inner path?
Well, there's the Cloud of Unknowing, another anonymous mystical text, this one from 14th century England. It advocates for something quite radical, a blind stirring of love unto God for himself.
A blind stirring, what does that mean?
It means letting go of trying to understand God intellectually or visualize divine forms. It's about a direct, intuitive movement of the heart, a simple reaching out in love towards the divine, even though the divine remains hidden, shrouded in this cloud of unknowing.
So, faith without conceptual understanding.
Precisely. The author argues that this direct, non-conceptual loving is actually more profitable to the health of thy soul and more pleasing to God than even contemplation or beholding of all the angels or saints in heaven. It emphasizes just continually keeping of the stirrings of his will towards God, regardless of intellectual clarity or sensory experience. It's a pure act of faith and inner devotion, bypassing the intellect.
Trusting the heart's movement over the mind's grasp.
That's a good way to put it. We have Paramahansa Yogananda in his famous autobiography of a yogi. He speaks of very advanced meditative states, particularly Nirvikalpa Samadhi.
Samadhi, that's a deep state of meditation, right?
Yes, Nirvikalpa is often described as the highest state, a state of absorption without form or thought, where the meditator's individual consciousness temporarily merges with the absolute, with cosmic consciousness. Yogananda describes the realization in this state that your earth is a dream of God.
The world is a dream.
Yes, and achieving this state, he says, promises access to finer dream-created realms, higher planes of existence. He even recounts a personal experience, a celestial promise from his master, that if Yogananda called upon him while in this deep samadhi state, the master would appear in flesh and blood.
Wow. That's a profound mystical connection, defying ordinary logic.
Absolutely. It highlights a path where reality itself is understood fundamentally differently as a manifestation of divine consciousness. And this understanding is accessed not through reasoning, but through these incredibly deep, altered states of meditative consciousness.
So these aren't just abstract philosophical ideas for them. They're lived, direct experiences that completely alter one's perception of reality. It makes me wonder, how does one even begin to access such profound states? Is it only for a select few, these kinds of mystics, or is there a path available for anyone seeking this kind of inner wisdom?
That's always the question, isn't it? The texts generally present these paths as available to all, in principle, but they often require immense dedication, purification, grace, and often a profound surrender of the ordinary egoic mind. Look at Rumi, the renowned 13th century Sufi mystic.
The poet.
Yes. As described in commentaries on his work, like the Mesnavi Book 2, Rumi exemplifies a path that explicitly turned away from dry scholarship towards mystical poetry and direct experience. His work constantly emphasizes the importance of love and transcending attachments to the world. It also dismisses concerns for worldly reputation, literal-mindedness, and intellectualism.
So love and experience over intellect and reputation.
Exactly. Rumi himself was known for sometimes falling into ecstatic trance and spinning around in public, the origin of the whirling dervishes. This showcases a direct, embodied experience of the divine that bypassed conventional intellectual and social norms, finding its expression in art, movement, and ecstatic love.
A very different path from quiet contemplation.
Very different, yet still focused inward on direct experience. And consider Black Elk Speaks, which gives us this powerful account of visionary experiences from the Oglala Lakota tradition.
Black Elk's visions.
Yes, he describes these incredibly vivid encounters in the spiritual realm, riding a bay horse through a rainbow door, meeting symbolic figures like the black horses of the west representing thunder and rain, and the sorrels of the east bringing light and peace. They bestow sacred gifts upon him. The cup of water to make live the greening day, representing life and renewal, and the sacred pipe and the power that is peace.
These sound like direct teachings through symbols and visions.
Exactly. And throughout his account, Black Elk cries out to Wakai Kayashka, the Great Spirit, to make me understand. It demonstrates a path where direct visions, symbolic encounters with the spirit world, are absolutely central to receiving wisdom and guidance, not just for himself, but for his people. Knowledge comes not through books or logical argument, but through direct communion with the sacred.
A profoundly different epistemology, really.
Completely. And just to reinforce this non-intellectual approach one more time, let's revisit Theologia Germanica. It states it so clearly: one cannot come to the true light in Christ's life by much questioning or reading, or by high natural skill and reason.
So not by thinking your way there?
No, but by truly renouncing ourselves in all things. Again, it points to this surrender of the intellectual ego, the letting go of accumulated knowledge and attachments, as the prerequisite for genuine spiritual insight. It emphasizes that the answers to life's deepest problems are found not in accumulation, but often in shedding, in subtraction, not addition.
It's truly striking, isn't it? Seeing this consistent thread among these deeply personal, often non-intellectual paths. Whether it's Siddhartha listening to the river, the author of The Cloud, advocating that blind stirring of love, Yogananda entering samadhi, Rumi's ecstatic poetry, or Black Elk receiving visions, there's this profound shift.
A shift away from what?
Away from relying primarily on external dogma, scripture interpreted literally, or scholastic debate, and towards cultivating an internal experiential pathway to truth. It suggests that for many traditions, for many individuals, the most direct route to the divine or to ultimate reality isn't found in books or sermons primarily, but in the depths of one's own being. Access through intuition, deep contemplation, visionary experience, ecstatic love, and often a radical willingness to surrender the ordinary mind. It's clear that this journey inward, whether it's through structured practice or contemplative insight, is incredibly profound. But how do these individual spiritual paths intersect with, or maybe even become defined by, our relationships, our connection with others, with society at large? That brings us to this crucial aspect of our collective human journey, because after all, we don't really exist in a vacuum, do we?
No, we certainly don't. The idea of a purely isolated self, achieving enlightenment alone on a mountaintop forever, it's often more myth than reality in many traditions. The self is rarely, if ever, truly separate. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit priest and paleontologist, in his work The Phenomenon of Man, offers this really powerful critique of what he calls the dangerous course of seeking fulfillment in isolation.
Dangerous. Why dangerous?
Because, he argues, it flatters our private egotism. It reinforces that illusion of separateness Tolle warned about. Teilhard argues that humanity only becomes consistent and at the same time probable, meaning understandable in the grand scheme, when viewed within a vast biological spacetime. He saw human evolution not just as individual, but as a continuation of the very lines of the universe.
Part of a cosmic unfolding.
Exactly. He envisioned humanity evolving towards a collective state of consciousness, a new sphere, a sphere of shared thought enveloping the planet. He strongly advocated for introducing collective realities as an objective category in our thinking, things like societies, cultures which cannot be simply reduced to the sum of their individual parts. For Teilhard, our individual evolution, our spiritual journey, is inseparable from this larger, collective unfolding of consciousness within the cosmos. To think our fulfillment is purely private is to miss the grander, interconnected design.
That's a huge perspective shift. From individual salvation to collective evolution.
It is. And Joseph Campbell, returning to his insights from The Power of Myth on relationships, he reiterates that point about marriage. You're sacrificing not to each other, but to unity in a relationship.
The relationship itself as the third entity?
Yes. And he explicitly connects this to the Chinese concept of the Tao, the dynamic interplay of yang and yin, male and female. It symbolizes a unified field created through interaction rather than just two separate competing entities. Our identity in this view is deeply shaped and even defined by these relational sacrifices and integrations. We find ourselves, paradoxically, by giving ourselves to a larger whole, whether it's a partnership or a community.
So connection requires a degree of self-transcendence.
It seems so. Now, Brené Brown, in Daring Greatly, brings a very modern psychological perspective to this collective dimension. She talks about the imperative for leaders, whether in families, schools, or workplaces, to rehumanize education and work.
Rehumanize? How?
By understanding how scarcity, that feeling of never enough, is affecting the way we lead and work, by learning how to engage with vulnerability, being willing to show up imperfectly, and by recognizing and combating shame, which thrives in silence and disconnection.
Vulnerability and shame. Those are tough topics in public spaces.
Incredibly tough. Brown asserts that honest conversations about vulnerability and shame are disruptive. They shake things up. But, she argues, they are absolutely essential for igniting creativity, innovation, and learning within communities and organizations. Her work powerfully underscores that healthy collective functioning requires individuals to bravely bring their whole selves, including their imperfections and struggles, into relationship with others. If we can't be vulnerable with each other, we can't truly connect, we can't trust, we can't innovate effectively, and our collective progress just stalls.
So individual willingness to be vulnerable unlocks collective potential.
That's the core idea. And Steven Pinker, in The Better Angels of Our Nature, tackles the collective through the lens of conflict and violence reduction. He analyzes what game theorists call the pacifist's dilemma.
The pacifist's dilemma? What's that?
It's similar to the prisoner's dilemma. He explains how aggression can often seem like the rational choice for a group or nation, purely out of fear of the other side attacking first. Fear of vulnerability drives preemptive aggression. He also highlights the fundamental truth that violence is almost always negative-sum. It creates more unhappiness and loss overall than happiness or gain for everyone involved in the long run.
So nobody really wins.
Right. He points out how mutual fear of attack, what political scientists call the Hobbesian trap or the security dilemma, can escalate everyone's belligerence. It's this vicious cycle. We arm ourselves because we fear they'll attack. They see us arming and arm themselves further and so on, making conflict more likely even if neither side initially wanted it.
A self-fulfilling prophecy of conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, Pinker also offers hope. He identifies how credible goodwill gestures, demonstrable actions that show peaceful intent, even if they involve some risk, can actually unwind the cycle of violence. It suggests that conscious, collective actions toward building trust and demonstrating peace can fundamentally change the dynamics of human interaction, even on a large scale. It requires choosing cooperation over fear.
These perspectives really do push us beyond just thinking about individual spiritual growth in isolation, don't they? They force us to address our responsibilities to each other, to the wider world. It's not just about self-improvement in a vacuum.
Not all.
It's about recognizing this deep interconnectedness Teilhard spoke of and seeing how our inner transformations like cultivating vulnerability, as Brown suggests, or choosing trust over fear, as Pinker implies, can ripple outward, how they can genuinely affect the collective, whether that's a marriage or workplace or even global conflict. It turns the problem of individual fulfillment into a much larger problem, or maybe opportunity, of collective thriving.
Absolutely. And building directly on that, a deeper understanding of ourselves, our inner motivations, our values, what truly matters, it inevitably leads to a profound reevaluation of our collective impact. Our responsibilities extend into societal structures, ethical choices, even our relationship with the environment. Our inner world isn't separate from the outer world. These sources really underscore that they are inextricably linked.
So the personal becomes political, or perhaps ecological.
You could certainly say that. James Baldwin, again in The Fire Next Time, articulates this incredibly powerful vision of collective liberation that directly challenges existing societal structures based on race. He writes quite radically, "The price of the liberation of the white people is the liberation of the blacks, the total liberation in the cities, in the towns, before the law, and in the mind."
Total liberation. He's saying freedom is indivisible.
That's precisely his argument. He critiques the existing societal values of his time, stating that white people, because of their entanglement in oppressive systems, cannot, in the generality, be taken as models of how to live and are themselves in sore need of new standards. His point, as I read it impartially, is that systemic oppression ultimately harms everyone involved, warping the consciousness of both the oppressor and the oppressed. True freedom, true societal health, requires the liberation of all. To truly see oneself clearly, one must also see the other clearly, and that requires a radical reevaluation of the foundational assumptions and narratives, like those DMN stories Poland mentioned, that uphold unjust structures.
A call for collective psychological and social transformation.
Yes. Now, shifting to an ecological focus, Robin Wall Kimmerer, in Braiding Sweetgrass, connects traditional indigenous practices, specifically from her Potawatomi heritage, to environmental stewardship in a deeply ethical and spiritual way.
How does she make that connection?
She explains how traditional activities, like Mohawk basket making, aren't just crafts. They weave a link between people and place, language and identity. This connection is rooted in deep gratitude, often expressed through communal practices like the Thanksgiving address, a profound ritual of acknowledging and thanking all elements of creation, from the waters to the plants to the animals to the winds.
A practice of active gratitude.
Active, specific, communal gratitude. She then starkly contrasts this reverence with the impact of industrial pollution, citing specific examples like companies near Akwesasne, whose contamination made following traditional life-waste fishing, gathering plants, basket making unsafe. This pollution directly threatened the physical health of the people and the spiritual bond between people and the land. Her work illuminates a worldview where human well-being is absolutely inseparable from the health and respectful treatment of the natural world, demanding a collective ethical responsibility based on reciprocity and gratitude, not just resource extraction.
It frames environmentalism not just as policy, but as a spiritual and ethical relationship.
Exactly. And Jason Hickel, in Less is More, offers a sharp critique of our dominant economic paradigm, particularly the obsession with gross domestic product, GDP growth, as the primary measure of progress.
He questions GDP growth. That's pretty fundamental to modern economics.
It is. He argues that under capitalism, the rate of growth is the rate at which nature is being commodified and roped into circuits of accumulation. Essentially, endless growth requires endlessly turning more of the natural world and human life into things that can be bought and sold, often leading to ecological destruction and social inequality.
So growth itself is the problem, in his view.
Endless, undifferentiated material growth in wealthy nations, yes. He provocatively suggests we need to retrain our eyes to see beyond GDP and consider degrowth in high-income countries. This isn't about advocating for poverty or economic collapse. It's about a planned, democratic reduction of resource and energy throughput, prioritizing ecological sustainability and social well-being over perpetual material expansion. It's about consciously choosing different societal goals, different problems for society to solve, like flourishing within planetary boundaries, rather than pursuing infinite growth on a finite planet.
Degrowth. That's a challenging idea for many.
Deeply challenging to conventional wisdom. Now, C.S. Lewis, in Mere Christianity, offers a glimpse from his specific theological perspective into what a fully Christian society might look like ethically and economically.
Okay, what are some features he describes?
He imagines a society with no passengers or parasites. If man does not work, he ought not to eat, emphasizing contribution and frowning on idleness. It would also feature no manufacture of silly luxuries and then of sillier advertisements to promote them. And crucially, it would be a society where everyone's work is to produce something good, something of genuine value. This vision, while rooted in a particular religious framework, paints a picture of a society structured around utility, community contribution, and the production of real value rather than excessive consumption, superficiality, or exploitation. It's an ideal where collective ethics heavily shape the economic and social structure.
A focus on contribution and genuine need over luxury and idleness.
That seems to be the emphasis. And finally, Caspar Turculi in The Power of Ritual addresses a very contemporary phenomenon. The rise of the nones people, especially younger generations, identifying as having no formal religious affiliation.
Right, that's a major trend.
It is. But Turcula argues this doesn't necessarily mean a loss of spirituality, but perhaps a shifting need. He suggests we need to creatively compost old rituals, adapt or transform traditional practices to meet our real-world needs. The goal, to regrow deeper relationships and speak to our hunger for meaning and depth in new ways.
Finding new forms for ancient needs.
Exactly. He suggests practices like reclaiming Sabbath time, not necessarily in a strictly religious sense, but as dedicated time for rest, reflection, connection, and digital detox, as a way to consciously lay down my grasping nature and enjoy every breath. It's about intentionally creating new personal and communal practices that foster connection, meaning, and belonging in an increasingly secularized, often fragmented world, acknowledging our enduring human need for ritual and shared purpose, even if the old containers no longer fit.
So adapting ancient wisdom for modern lives.
That's the idea. And what's truly insightful across all these examples, Baldwin, Kimmerer, Hickel, Lewis, Turquili, is how a deeper understanding of the self, of our inner motivations, our values, inevitably leads to this profound reevaluation of our collective impact and responsibilities. They challenge us to move beyond purely individualistic pursuits, to recognize that our well-being is deeply intertwined with the health of our communities, our societies, the very planet we inhabit. They're all asking us, in different ways, to consider not just our personal problems, but the shared problems of humanity, and to face them with intention, ethics, and maybe even a transformed consciousness.
We've covered so much ground: the self, struggle, acceptance, diverse paths, interconnectedness. Now, as we start to bring this deep dive towards a close, let's turn our attention to how we can avoid, the easy answers, the superficial solutions. How do we truly engage with complex truth and move beyond conventional wisdom, especially when so much of modern life seems to push us towards quick fixes and simplistic thinking?
That's a crucial question, isn't it? How we cultivate discernment. This is where a truly counterintuitive spirituality often comes in, challenging us to look deeper. Eckhart Tolle, back in A New Earth, makes that really useful distinction again between cleverness and intelligence.
Right, we touched on that earlier regarding the ego.
We did. And it's relevant here, too. He describes cleverness as that which pursues its own little aims, is extremely short-sighted, often motivated by self-interest, and ultimately divides. Because it lacks that bigger picture view, it often leads to eventually self-defeating outcomes. Think of a clever marketing trick that boosts quarterly profits but alienates customers long-term.
Short-term gain, long-term pain.
Exactly. In contrast, he says, intelligence sees the larger whole in which all things are connected. Cleverness divides, intelligence unites. This serves as a profound caution against jumping at quick, ego-driven solutions that might look positive or effective on the surface, but lack the holistic wisdom to truly benefit us or the world in the long run. True well-being, true solutions aren't found in just being clever, but in cultivating that deeper intelligence that understands interconnectedness and consequences.
So, resisting the allure of the quick fix in favor of deeper understanding.
Precisely. Aldous Huxley, in his classic anthology, The Perennial Philosophy, offers a powerful critique of getting stuck on the surface level of religion, particularly regarding ritual and literalism.
How so?
He states quite bluntly, ceremonies in themselves are not sin, but whoever supposes that he can attain to life either by baptism or by partaking of bread merely through the external act is still in superstition. He's warning against mistaking the symbol for the reality it points to.
The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself.
Exactly that idea. He quotes an earlier writer, John Everard, who warns against always handling the letter of the word, always licking the letter, always chewing upon that. Everard suggests that focusing solely on the literal text without seeking the deeper spirit leaves people as starvelings, spiritually malnourished. They're stuck on the surface. Huxley then points approvingly to Zen Buddhism's concept of a special transmission outside the scriptural teaching, one which, by pointing directly at the human mind, told us to see here the ultimate ground of all things.
So prioritizing direct inner experience over just adhering to external forms or literal interpretations.
That's the core of Huxley's argument here. He's advocating for depth over superficiality in religious practice.
And does history bear this out, this tension between inner experience and outward form?
Karen Armstrong, in The Case for God, provides some really interesting historical context on this, particularly within Western Christianity. She discusses a historical shift, especially after the Reformation, towards what she calls intellectual orthodoxy.
Intellectual orthodoxy, meaning right belief.
Yes, a strong emphasis on correct doctrine. She notes that preachers began to air their disagreements in public and urged the laity to join the debate. This led different denominations to focus heavily on specific doctrines to distinguish themselves, which in turn pushed intellectual orthodoxy to the fore. Knowing and affirming the correct beliefs became paramount.
And what was the alternative?
She contrasts this with, for example, aspects of the Catholic Counter-Reformation, which strongly emphasized religion as practice. Things like Ignatian spirituality, meditative techniques designed to promote genuinely interior devotion. Her work highlights how a heavy preoccupation with intellectual debates and dogmatic distinctions can sometimes overshadow or even crowd out the lived, experiential, transformative aspects of faith, reducing it to a set of propositions to be affirmed rather than a way of being to be lived.
But life versus practice, or maybe belief needing to be grounded in practice.
Exactly. Now, bringing in a scientific perspective, Richard Dawkins, known for his critiques of religion, questions religious faith, particularly when it appears as blind trust without evidence. He also introduced the influential concept of memes, ideas, beliefs, behaviors that spread culturally, much like genes spread biologically.
Right, the idea of cultural evolution.
Yes. He's a strong advocate for scientific inquiry and seeking objective truth. However, interestingly, even Dawkins acknowledges a certain nuance regarding scientific methods themselves. He notes that what we consider objective truth and scientific understandings are not static, they change over time. Science relies on evolving traditions of inquiry and demonstration I currently have faith in.
Faith in the scientific method itself.
In a sense, yes. Faith in its processes, its ability to self-correct, its underlying assumptions. This suggests, perhaps unexpectedly, that even within science, there's a reliance on certain foundational frameworks of trust and methods of inquiry. It cautions against a simplistic view of any single path to truth, whether scientific or religious, as being absolute, unchanging, or entirely free of underlying assumptions or faith in its own methodology.
It's a really interesting nuance. So across these very different critiques, Tolle, Huxley, Armstrong, even Dawkins in a way, there's this common thread, isn't there? Questioning surface-level understandings, advocating for a deeper, more engaged approach. Whether that engagement is primarily intellectual, experiential, ethical, or some combination. It might be Tolle calling for intelligence over mere cleverness, Huxley warning against mistaking the ritual for the reality, Armstrong highlighting the importance of inner devotion alongside doctrine, or Dawkins challenging blind faith while acknowledging the evolving nature of scientific truth. They all seem to urge us to scrutinize assumptions, dig beneath the obvious, and wrestle with complexity rather than settling for easy answers, choosing the deeper, harder problems that lead to real understanding.
Indeed. And this call for deeper engagement, for moving beyond superficiality, extends right into how we perceive value in our most ordinary everyday lives. This brings us to redefining value, finding the profound potential hidden within the mundane, transforming common activities through sheer intentionality. It's about finding spiritual depth not just on a meditation cushion or in a temple, but in the practical, often overlooked choices we make constantly.
Finding the sacred in the ordinary.
Precisely. Consider Marie Kondo and her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. It seems purely practical, but she elevates the seemingly simple act of tidying into something akin to a spiritual practice.
How does she do that, beyond just decluttering?
She posits that the whole process, carefully assessing each of your belongings, identifying those that have fulfilled their purpose, consciously expressing gratitude to them, and then bidding them farewell, this process is really about examining your inner self. She calls it a rite of passage to a new life.
Examining your inner self through your stuff.
Exactly. And the famous criterion for keeping something isn't based on complex theories or numerical data like, have I used it in 6 months? It's purely an intuitive sense of attraction. Does it spark joy? This transforms a mundane household chore into a profound act of self-reflection, clarifying values, practicing gratitude, and intentionally choosing what energy, what problems or possessions you want to keep in your life. It brings mindfulness right into your closet.
That's a great example. What else?
Think about Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary 17th century Japanese swordsman, in his writings compiled as The Complete Musashi. He advocates for continuous, incredibly arduous training, but not just for physical skill.
For what else then?
The purpose of the relentless training is to purge the student's mind of presumptions and bad habits, to strip away the ego, the preconceived notions, the mental clutter. The goal is to reach a state where the spirit is clear and devoid of bias. He calls this the direct path, and he emphasizes quite starkly that without forging the mind and body through years of austere training, there is no chance of success.
So the intense practice is mind purification.
Yes. And his advice on combat itself reflects this. Observe your opponent dispassionately, remain serene internally, act decisively when they are bewildered. It speaks to a highly intentional, almost meditative approach that transcends mere physical technique, completely integrating mind, body, and spirit. The daily grind, the struggle of practice itself, becomes the path to spiritual clarity and effortless mastery, finding stillness in action.
Turning discipline into a spiritual path.
Exactly. Then there's Henry David Thoreau in Walden. He eloquently describes a profound value he found in simple, solitary experiences living by the pond.
Like what kind of experiences?
He recounts things like fishing alone at midnight, feeling just a slight vibration, travel up the line from mysterious fish moving in the deep, dark water. An experience, he says, that came to interrupt your dreams and link you to nature again. He also highlights the practical independence found in radical simplicity, like figuring out how to bury a pail of water in the sand to keep it cool, or cutting ice from the pond.
Finding meaning in simplicity and connection with nature.
Precisely. Thoreau's entire narrative is a testament to finding deep meaning, profound connection, and genuine self-reliance, not in accumulating wealth or status or following convention, but in quiet, intentional observation of the natural world, and in choosing a deliberate, unburdened way of life. It was about consciously choosing to live with fewer, but perhaps more essential problems.
Living deliberately.
That's the phrase. And one more. Tamar Adler, in her book An Everlasting Meal, brings a similar kind of profound intentionality to the everyday act of cooking.
How is cooking profound?
She advocates for cooking with economy and grace, pushing the limits of a single pot of water's utility, like boiling vegetables, then maybe beans, then maybe pasta, all in succession in the same water, capturing flavor and saving energy. She also suggests always cooking more vegetables than you need for one meal, deliberately planning to transform the leftovers into future meals throughout the week.
Resourcefulness as a virtue.
Yes, but it's more than just frugality. This practical approach subtly encourages a mindful, deeply resourceful, and respectful relationship with food and resources. It elevates a daily necessity, cooking, into an act of thoughtful stewardship, creativity, and connection to the ingredients in the process, finding satisfaction and even grace in the everyday act of nourishing oneself and others thoughtfully.
These insights really do powerfully challenge us, don't they? To find deeper meaning and value, not just in the big spiritual quests or abstract philosophies, but right here. In the choices we make every day, the attention we bring to simple tasks, the intentionality we cultivate in ordinary life.
Absolutely.
From tidying a room to preparing a meal to engaging in rigorous training or just observing nature, it seems the how we do things can be just as, if not more, transformative than the what we do. It's about recognizing that our spiritual journey isn't separate from our daily life. It's woven right into the fabric of our everyday existence, constantly presenting us with these small problems, these choices that, when approached consciously, become opportunities for profound growth and presence.
Wow. What a journey we've taken today. I mean, really, from the intricate rituals of ancient Egypt through the deep mystical insights of Plotinus or the Theologia Germanica, all the way to the psychological and societal reflections of modern thinkers like Brené Brown or Jason Heckel. It's covered a huge amount of ground.
It really has. We've explored the subtle, often really tricky nature of the self, that elusive ego. We've looked at the transformative power that can actually lie within struggle and acceptance. And we've touched on just some of the myriad paths humanity has carved out in its ongoing quest for meaning and spiritual fulfillment. It truly is a vast and endlessly fascinating landscape.
And hopefully exploring it this way offers, as we said at the start, maybe a bit of a shortcut to understanding some of humanity's deepest questions and the diverse ways we've tried to answer them.
I think it does.
And despite the vast differences, different eras, different languages, completely different doctrines and practices, these diverse sources, when you look closely, they share a powerful common thread.
What would you say that thread is?
I think it's the conviction, repeated again and again, that genuine wisdom, a truly fulfilling life, it often demands an honest confrontation with reality. It demands a deep understanding of the self that goes beyond superficiality. And it requires a courageous embrace of life's inevitable challenges, seeing them not just as obstacles, but as potent opportunities for growth.
So facing reality, knowing ourselves deeply, and embracing challenges.
Exactly. And whether that journey unfolds through structured devotion like chanting or prayer, or through profound introspection and meditation, or through engaged ethical action in the world, the journey inward, however we take it, profoundly impacts and reshapes our external experience, and ultimately our collective existence. It really comes back to that idea of accepting that problems are part of life, and then choosing to make them meaningful, to learn from them.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I really invite you, our listener, just to pause for a moment and consider what aspect of this whole exploration resonated most deeply with you today? What particular idea or quote or maybe even contradiction stood out? What nugget of knowledge did you unearth that might shift your own perspective or maybe even your practice going forward?
Maybe it was the idea that your identity isn't necessarily fixed, but a story you can consciously revise. Or maybe Frankl's assertion that even in the depths of suffering, there remains that unshakable core of inner freedom, the freedom to choose your attitude.
Lots to reflect on.
Definitely. And perhaps here's a final thought to ponder, to take with you. If, as Michael E. Singer suggests, awareness itself, that core consciousness in you, actually transcends whatever it is aware of, your thoughts, feelings, circumstances. And if the ultimate path to freedom perhaps lies in learning to relax behind our inner turmoil rather than constantly fighting it,
Okay.
then how might our daily problems, the things that bother us or challenge us, become not obstacles to be eliminated at all costs, but the very grist for the mill, the raw material for our deepest self-discovery? And what does it truly mean to understand, as the Bhagavad Gita suggests, that by our own activities, our past conditioning, we are often conditioned and thus find ourselves involuntarily doing things we may not even like or consciously choose? How does recognizing this deep-seated conditioning actually free us, paradoxically, to choose a more conscious, more deliberate, more meaningful path in our lives right now?
Wow. That's definitely food for thought. How recognizing our conditioning can lead to freedom.
It's exactly something to mull over as you continue to navigate the fascinating, complex, and often counterintuitive spirituality of your own existence.